Welcome to today's episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. We are super excited to have the owner and founder of Gains, Braven Grant, on our episode today, speaking with myself and Matt. And listen, he is someone you want to follow. He's built a successful supplement company, most known for their creatine, and they are adding other product lines. And he shares some amazing insights he's learned about leadership, having built and scaled a company so quickly. We're excited to bring him to you today.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization. Hey, well, welcome everyone to the Everyday Leader podcast. We are stoked to be here with Braven Grant, the founder and owner of Gains in Bulk, and we're actually in Gains in Bulk warehouse. So it's kind of, and this is the first podcast ever recorded in the
first one
studio, right?
Yeah, really excited to be here.
Yeah, so thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. Well, so as you know, the name of our podcast is the Everyday Leader, and you have built something really remarkable that's taken a fair amount of leadership and still does. And so would love to just start there. Like, tell us a little bit about your journey. If you think about it as like your leadership journey, what does that look like, and what has influenced you, and what have you learned along the way?
That's a huge question. I mean, one of our core values as a company is everyone's a leader. So I think leadership's huge. I think leadership's like what sets the culture, it sets the action. I think for me, leadership, I don't know, I'm trying to think like what's been the genesis of leadership in my life. And I honestly think way before I started the business, I think I was like 13 and I was in Boy Scouts. And I had this really awesome leader in Boy Scouts he was a leader in my life. And we were just being super dumb at the scout camp, like just kind of rebelling, not showing up to any of the merit badge things. And we were just, I don't know, causing chaos. And it was one of the evenings and my leader said, hey, like, let's go for a walk. I need to get some from my truck. And like, you come with me. I was like, I don't like, you can walk by yourself. You're an adult. He's like, no, come walk with me. I was like, okay. And anyway, we're walking and like, he didn't get mad at me. Didn't like scold me or anything like every other adult had in my life. And he was just like, hey, I just want you to know that you're a leader and that people will follow you. And he's like, you don't have a choice in being a leader. It's just, it's like already there. And he was saying, I think like you have maybe some sort of unique ability to lead or that people follow you. But he was just saying like it's not a choice. This isn't like a calling or someone's going to give you the title. You're just a leader. So the question will be, are you going to lead other people to do good things or are you going to lead them to do bad things? And like, that was like the whole conversation. Then we pretty much just walked in silence for like 20 minutes for me to think about that question of would I be a good leader or bad leader, but either way I was going to be a leader. And I think that was, I don't know, not maybe the first time I thought that I was a leader or thought about being a leader, but first time it became serious to me of like, oh, what's the responsibility of being a leader? And that's where the core value for our company of everyone's leader comes from, is because every person already is. Like, it's not a title thing. It's not a given thing. It's just, if you show up here and you're working around other people, you'll influence them. And so everyone's a leader. And so I think it's the first to me is just like the responsibility of it, trying to grasp that, understand that. And I don't know.
No,
take it seriously.
Yeah, that's so good. Like, I think that one of the things in that story that's so powerful is him saying, hey, you're a leader. And that sounds so simple. And yet how often do we maybe miss an opportunity to help someone see themselves that way?
For sure.
So with that being said, like, you shared one of your core values is everyone's a leader. What does that look like here at Gains? Like, how do people that maybe don't see themselves that way come here and end up seeing themselves as a leader? Like, what are the kind of things that happen here to help people see themselves that way?
As simple as it is, one, I think talking about it helps. Like, That's something I've learned from my dad, watching him run a business. And for a while, like our office was like just renting an office from him and his office. So I was like, always saw his company meetings and stuff. And he would just basically say the same things over and over again. And it was like a little bit, felt like a broken record. And as a young kid, I would like make fun of him for it and be like, oh, okay, like Dad, like we've heard that story 100 times. And, but what I realized after watching for long enough is like, oh, like now then the people start talking the way he was talking. Like everyone started using those stories, or new people would come in who hadn't heard the story. And so he was saying it again. And, someone who's been there 10 years heard it 100 times at this point, but the new person is the first time. And other people are like, starting to share it and stuff. And so I think that's a big part of it, is like, if you start sharing something verbally, there's like the initial maybe reception or rejection of it. Like people like, oh, that's cool, it's a good idea. And then there's the like, okay, this is getting annoying. But then I feel like there's another like on the backside of that where people go, oh, it's not just something that we're saying, like it actually means something. So it just takes a lot of saying it though. I think that's one. And in every person who comes in the company, when I'm interviewing them in the very beginning or right before they start, I talk to them about that core value. It's like the number one that I talk about, because I just say, hey, I want you to know on day one, you're a leader. Like, don't wait till 3 months or a year down the road. Like, you get to show up and you'll influence the people. Like, you can come in with huge, massive energy and excitement and like productivity, and you're going to like light a little bit of a fire under our most veteran people, or you can come in and bring low energy and you can suck some of the energy out of the rest of us. But either way, you're going to be leading. So just know that. And there's a responsibility by joining this team that you're already a leader. And so I think one, talking about it, and then just giving people opportunities to lead, trusting, team members. I would say was the first really big leadership hurdle I overcame, was like, how do I start trusting other people to do things? And that's really hard in the beginning, I think. Like, I know a lot of business owners just don't make it past that.
Yeah.
So that's so good.
I really like how it's like day one, before they even start, you're talking about leadership. Like, I think there's like huge clues there of like, if you want a culture, if you want a place where everyone sees themselves as leader, you can't just say it once.
Yeah.
And expect everyone to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to come back to the trust thing and unpack that, because you're right. Like, tons of people, that's a really serious challenge.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the repeating things 100 times or a million times.
Yeah.
Because I really think that's another big part of, look, when you choose to be a leader or decide like, hey, I'm going to be a leader, you're basically signing up for saying the same thing over and over and over again for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that can be really exhausting. I think even in parenting, right, that it's like, sometimes I'm shocked that I'm having this conversation with my kids again.
Mm-hmm.
That's on me. Like, I don't need to be surprised, because that's leadership, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about how, like, it's super cool that you got to see your dad doing that.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Do you remember moments where it was like, I'm getting exhausted of saying this and I'm going to say it anyways? Or has it just kind of been so ingrained in you? Tell us a little bit about what that's looked like.
Yeah. No, I think there's tons of times. And this, I'll also say something that's really important, is to, I want to say it somewhat respectfully, but the blunt of it is like, you have to get rid of people who are toxic against those values.
Right. Because they'll be working as hard against you.
Yeah. And it's very hard to lead and say those things when there's people sitting there rolling their eyes back at you. So that's been a huge thing that I didn't understand, and that I've learned maybe really only over the last like year and a half, was, there was a lot of time, the whole time I ran this company, I've like also somewhat wanted to like give self-development to our team and like share with them the thing. I've invested a ton in personal development and growth. It's, I would say more passionate about just overall human development than I am about like fitness development. Even though we're a fitness company, I think it's really about, for me, it's just human progression. And so I've always like had weekly company meetings and had like every time we have company meetings, try to have like quotes or whatever, right? Like just have that be a part of it. And there was a season for maybe like a year and a half where I just felt like drained. And I would tell my wife, I would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just prepping for a company meeting where I might share a 10-minute thought, just because I was like, I'm going to make it so good, because like no one seems to be getting anything out of these. So I'm going to like prep it and make it so good. And it still would just fall flat, or I would just feel this like, man, they're like not getting it, or they don't care. And at some point I just had to realize like, okay, these aren't the right people. Like they don't want it. They don't want me to try and pour into them. They don't want to receive it. They don't want to develop. And so a part of it to me, if you have the right people, it makes it a lot easier, right? If you have people who want to receive it. So now we have a weekly training like that I do with the team, but it's by choice. I buy them lunch, so I kind of bribe them to come. But it's like an unpaid lunch, so like they do have to choose to come, and you don't have to come. But I think almost everyone in the company comes, or on most weeks they come. But it's like them choosing into it, and that's a big deal to me. Is like I want a team of people who choose into coming. We also have a team workout once a week, and it's like you get to choose to come. You don't have to come; it's not mandatory. But it's like that shows me like who's here to self-develop, who's here to grow, and having those people on the team makes it a lot easier on you as a leader. And then it makes it easier when there's like one person or two people kind of falling behind to like pour into them, and it not be like this huge exhausting thing where you're like, yeah, and they're just people that don't want it. Like if they don't want it, you can't make someone want it. Or I don't know how to do that, at least.
What's fascinating about that is like then you see who's bought in.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Like if it's not something anyone has to come to, it's you're invited.
It maybe in a way does also inspire the person who's half in when they see someone else buy in. Like, because this is what I say is like, as a titled leader, you can set the rules. Like as a boss, you can set the rules. But then the everyday leader, like the everyone leader, is who sets the culture, which is what actually people do. So I can say, hey, it's important to me that we self-develop here. It's important to me to do that. But it's like everyone's kind of watching that or thinking like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, I just want to come do my job, whatever. But then when you see the other guy next to you do it and he's bought in, then you're like, oh, okay. So it helps lift. You can have a couple people that need to be developed in that way, but you have to have core team members that are like actually bought in and about it. And that I think helps to lift everyone up. So, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it. It sounds like what you can share about the pain of getting from that point where you were now. Is there some growth that had to come? Like how?
I mean, firing people is the worst experience, the worst thing as a business owner, period. Like, it doesn't matter if like I don't know the person, or if they're like, I've had to fire best friends, family members. I mean, and that's the hard thing in the beginning is most people you hire is just the person who was like there.
Yeah.
And it's also hard because that was also the person that was there. Like they're the person that supported you. And so you feel this loyalty to them, but there's a certain point where they just might not be the right fit, and it might not be the right fit for them either.
Yeah.
Like, there's just something that isn't working. So to have to make those decisions, I think is, one of the most difficult things, as being a business owner. And so, yeah, that's been a really difficult, journey, and trying to find the balance of taking care of people and being loyal in the sense of keeping them on versus loyalty to like the higher purpose of the company, to the other team members that need my loyalty to them to make sure the company's growing, and to even that person who is seemingly stuck here. And it's a really hard thing because it can feel a little self-righteous to be like, hey, I'm firing you and I think it's in your best interest. It's hard to say that to someone, and typically I don't actually get to say that because it just sounds self-serving to say that. But I truly, like, in all those situations, get to a point where I feel that. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't serving this person anymore. It's also not serving my entire company, the entire team, and what our goals are. We're just not aligned. And so, you know, as one of all of our coaches, Chris would say, or free up their future, right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, though. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to give advice to anyone who's a business owner, it's like, you already know who those people are. And when you keep going and you ask, like, do you think we should fire him? Do I think I should do this? Or I would go and, you know, talk to my wife about it and like try and get her support or advice or whatever. And it's like, at some point you got to realize, like, you already know the thing that needs to happen. And when you make those decisions and you put the mission of your company and the team members that are being loyal and pouring in, you put them first, they start pouring back into you, and the company starts pouring back into you. So yeah, that would be, if I had to give an advice on it, it's like, you already probably know the people, and you gotta move fast rather than slow, and it will communicate to people on the team, oh, like, my leader's serious about this. This isn't just lip service. Like, he's serious about where we're going. And really, the closer the people have been to me, that I've had to let go, like the closer friend or family member, when the team sees that I'm willing to let that person go because they no longer fit the vision, it's like, oh, okay, we're serious. Like, no, in effect, no one's safe.
Loud and clear.
Like, and that's not a mean thing. It's really a like standard thing of, like, I think about an NBA team. They're not like, oh man, like, you've been here 8 years though. Like, it's okay that you don't score points anymore. It's like, no, hey, we have a mission to go win a championship. Like, right, that's got to be prioritized. So I want to be a part of a team like that. And I think good team members want to be a part of a team like that. So
Yeah. Great hard advice.
Yeah. And I don't think any of us have any evidence of when waiting was helpful.
Mm-mm.
Right.
Yeah.
We try to trick ourselves into that, right? Like, well, we just give it some time, or like after the new year, and it's like, if it's not working now, it's not going to be.
Yeah, it's like a bad boyfriend or girlfriend. It's like, you're like, oh, well, it's Christmas time, so I don't want to like break up with them, but then you just have to spend another Christmas with them. So it's like, yeah, it's easier early than late. Yeah.
Braven, we should have probably asked you this right off the bat, but could you give a little bit of background for our listener just about Gains and Bolt, where it started, how it got to where it's at right now, just what that's looked like?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're we sell premium, like, whole food, natural supplements, mostly fitness focused products. And we started, my family's been in the fitness industry my whole life. I grew up in it. My dad was a world champion powerlifter. My mom's been a Miss Olympia figure competitor. My older brother was a state champion powerlifter. Like, we've just been in that. I grew up in it. My dad was one of the first nutritionists ever hired in the NBA. He was the first nutritionist ever hired in the NBA. So I grew up in that world. And then when I was 15 or 14, I went to my first Olympia Expo, and it was just like this crazy, basically like party with all these people like who were into fitness, and I was just kind of really getting into lifting and that side of things myself. And so I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. I want to like be a part of this somehow. And anyway, so my dad had been doing stuff with, formulating whole food products for doctors and things like that. And I was like, Dad, like, do you think we could do something in the fitness world? And he was like, no, it's super saturated. You don't want to do that. Whatever. But that kind of like was just got the bug at that expo.
Good thing you didn't listen to him.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say, like, people ask me like, well, what is it? Do you feel like it's like a disadvantage that you came from a small town? Someone asked me that at a dinner I was at a couple weeks ago, because I was telling him, like, oh, my graduating class was like 51 people, like super small town. And he's like, do you think I was like a disadvantage? I'm like, well, it's maybe a disadvantage in comparison to like, had I been like super well connected and had this huge network of like friends that's like parents were like lawyers and all that, like, maybe not like that advantage, but I actually think it was an advantage simply because I was like naive. Mm-hmm. Like, me and Caleb, my partner, we had this sign in our first office that said $1 billion impact. And I remember just saying like, oh, we're going to build $1 billion brand. I'm like, we had never seen anything. Like, so we just thought like, oh, it's just $1 billion. Like, we could do that. Like, let's just go figure out. So I think there was some naivety that supported us in that, coming from a small town. I can't remember what the first question. There was a question. Gains.
Bolt, how
it's
come to where it is now.
Your dad said, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, my dad said don't do it. And I was like, yeah, we were just dumb enough to think we could. And I was like, well, there's some dude who owns this company too, like, what's he got that we don't have? So anyway, and I was like, and they're selling crappy products. And I was like, and I knew like through my dad and everything, like we could put something together that was really quality and natural and not just full synthetic stuff. So in my head, I'm like, dude, we can make a better product, so we could beat these guys. Like, that was the extent of how complicated it was in my brain. But anyway, that kind of planted the seed. And then 2 years later, I was 16, I was at this, it's a big, like, a supplier expo where, like, just people are putting on display, like, their new ingredients and technology in the industry and all that stuff. I was just there with my dad. Super boring expo, but I just went with him. And I ended up meeting, kind of luckily, the guy who invented instantized creatine, which is our core product. And thought it was really cool. And it was kind of like maybe the only thing I really truly understood at the expo. I was like, creatine fitness is super cool, and it was 100% soluble. I was like, wow, I think we could do something with that. Ended up going to an expo that year with the product, and we sold 1,000 units that weekend at the expo. And I didn't know at the time, but like expos are not really a place you go to sell stuff, so you go to give away free stuff. So the fact that we were selling it there told me it was like, oh wow, this is really cool. Like I think we have something. So that was kind of how it started. That was in 2016, and I ended up going and serving a mission for my church. So the company just kind of like didn't really. It was kind of, I would say, like more of a hobby, like family thing. And then when I got home, we were like trying to figure out what we should do with it. Like no one was really like trying to grow it. It wasn't really making any money. And so we were like, oh, well, either just like shut it down and kind of like turn off the list and like let the customers that we had, a few customers, like, hey, we don't sell the product anymore. But then I was like, I don't want to work for anyone. I'd sold door to door, and I was going to possibly go sell door to door that next summer. So I was like, I need to figure this out. And then that's when Caleb kind of came into the picture, and we were like, started learning Facebook ads and the online marketing space. And I told a company that I was going to go sell door to door for, I told them, hey, I signed the thing, but I was like, we need to have in here that I like by April 1st, I can tell you guys no, because if I can get my company to work before then I'm not going to come out. And we're doing like 20 to 30,000 a month in total sales, but like zero profitability, like at all. And like no one was getting paid. And so I think like in February of that year, we did 28,000. And then March, the month before that contract, in March, we did like 150,000 in sales. And I was like, oh my gosh, we figured it out. We cracked it. We sold out of all of our inventory, and then we sold out like 4 more times that year. And, it's just, that was kind of the real start, I would say, in my opinion, of like how we really started.
You made some money since then?
Yeah, we've done all right. We're not huge, but we've done all right. So
awesome.
Yeah, we've been blessed.
That is amazing.
Well, that's crazy that it was that close that it may not even have grown to what
Could
it
have just
is.
gone back and sold Pescas. What were you selling?
It was going to be Pesco. I had sold satellite and then solar the next summer, and then I was going to go sell pests.
Gotcha.
And I was good at door to door. I just hated it. I hated that it wasn't my customer. I hated that I was like building someone else's business. I hated like that I tried to be integral, but I just felt like the whole thing was a little bit of a lie the whole time. Like even if I wasn't technically lying, I was still like the whole show up at the door and be like, oh, it's over at your neighbor Judy's house, and like all of that. I was like, I mean, your neighbor Judy, I sold like a week ago, 48 blocks away, So anyway, I didn't love just the whole vibe of that industry. So
one thing I'd love for you to share too, Braven, is in knowing you personally, I know that you're very big in doing what you feel. I don't know if the word's called or like what you feel.
What I feel God wants me to do.
Yeah. And tell me how that's like shaped your business and just maybe even helped you as a leader.
Yeah, how it's encouraged you to keep going as a leader.
Oh man, no one's ever asked me that question. But it's a question I've considered a ton, because I would say there's kind of two sides of the business world, like entrepreneurs that you hear on social media, like influencers in the entrepreneur space. There's the kind that are very like, hey, the game is just math. Like you don't have to like what you're doing. You don't have to care about it. Like it's just a numbers money game, and you're just trying to play this game to spit more money out the other side. And it's like very logic based. And I think that side has always really intrigued me, because it feels like in a way the right answer. But it also, every time I've gone that direction, I've like been left just super empty. Like the first year that I made $1 million of like on like my taxable income, I was like super depressed. I felt like, what the heck? Like I thought I was supposed to feel something here. I played the game right, and we spat out this much money, and it's just kind of like nothing. And I wasn't proud of where the brand was at. I wasn't proud of what we were doing. We weren't lying. Like we weren't doing anything wrong, but I just wasn't proud of it. I just didn't feel like it was like what I wanted to build. So I was like, really conflicted about that. And so that's one side. And then there's the other side that's very like, leave a legacy, chase your dreams, like do that whole thing. And that side, I feel like sometimes social media just seems a little bit like cliche, and it's easy to just be like, these guys are idiots. Like they're just yelling and whatever. But at the same time, I've always felt like, but if that's real, like I want to feel that way. I want to feel like what I'm doing matters. I want to feel like what I'm doing is like my calling. I want to feel like God wants me to be doing what I'm doing. And so I feel like I've almost like been in a battle of those two sides of me. And I think there's value to both of them. But I think at the end of the day, I finally just like chose to accept that like I'm the kind of guy who wants to do something I feel called to do. I wanted to make a lot of money, but I would rather make less and feel to feel proud of it. To feel like, man, this is like my thing. When someone asks me what my business is, like we're changing the name of the company this year, one part just because of that, because I want to be able to say it and be like, yeah, that's our brand.
And we just yet, or is it?
Yeah, we just signed the contract to get the trademarks to line up. Like literally last week. They've been working on this for like a year and a half now, and so the company will now just be Gains. Sweet. So it's like in bulk was a part of how the company was originally going to be. We were selling raw ingredients in bulk, but we since have kind of stopped going that direction. And the bulk just always felt like this thing I had to explain, and also kind of turned off half the audience of like women who are just like bulk is just like not the thing that they want, even though we weren't saying bulkiness. But anyway, so it'll be just Gains. The website will be gainsnutrition.com. We just got like domain, trademarks, all that. So, but to me, anyway, the point is like, I want to build something that we're proud of. I want the team members that work here to be like, oh yeah, I work there. Like I work at Gains. I'm proud of it. Like, you know, for someone to look at our Instagram and like, or to show someone our Instagram or show someone what we're doing and then be like, wow, that's really cool. Like I would want to be a part of that. So, yeah, as far as like going where God wants me to go, yeah, I mean, you may have to ask me in 10 years if I still feel the same, but I just chose to be like, that's the way I want to live my life. And maybe it's, you know, maybe my feelings aren't always accurate, or like maybe our feelings can deceive us. I've had a lot of people tell me that, or like there's a scripture in the Bible that says like, beware of like your heart, because your heart can deceive a man, whatever, right? That scripture. But there's also like 100 other verses that say your heart will tell you and lead you, and like, that's the thing that like, that's the way God speaks to you is through your heart. So I'm like, yeah, be careful, because it could lead you like, right, like to be like, oh, I'm going to have an affair with this chick that's hot because my heart just like wants that, right? But so yeah, there's caution there, but also I believe like that's how God speaks through us. And I've just chosen to be like, I'm going to live my life to trust that. And I think I'll be more proud of that than the times where I've chosen the logical path that I didn't feel called to do. And even if the result was on the surface positive, I was left empty. And it's just, so that's kind of where that decision's come for me. It's just like, I want to be fulfilled more than I want to be rich. I also want to make money though. So yeah, I think I can have both.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, why don't we go back to the thing we set aside, which is the trust thing. This is a big, I mean, I think regardless of any listener's title, role, position, I mean, if you got kids, if you work somewhere, that this is an issue. Like, how do we trust people?
Yeah.
And so share a little bit just over the last couple of years as you've recognized that, what have you done to be okay with it? And to trust people?
There's one of my favorite quotes of this year. It's just, I think I'd heard it before, but I heard it this year, or read it, and it was just like, hit me. It's the quote, believed by, is it President, I think Truman, I believe it's Truman, but he said, you can accomplish anything if you don't care who gets the credit. And I'm a very like, I like to be the guy that gets the credit. Like I want to have a personal brand that's big. I want to be famous. Like I'm not even shy about that. Like I would say I want to be famous. Like my childhood dream is like, I want to be an actor. Like I think it'd be so cool to just walk places and everyone know who I am. So that's like something for me to battle, because that quote, like you can accomplish anything if you don't care who gets the credit. And I think that, that's a part of it, is like, it's not just trusting people, it's also being willing to trust someone and let them go do their thing, knowing like that they're the one that's probably going to get the credit for it, or they, it might not come back to give you the credit. And it's like, hey, do I care about the outcome, or do I care about me getting credit? And so, that's been a big development on it this year. Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about that quote first, and then we can go into a
No,
little.
that's awesome.
I think it resonates with me. I think there's a lot of truth in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pride really is one of the trickiest things to deal with as a leader.
Yeah.
And even as a parent, like where there's no money on the line, it still is a big thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like being willing to admit when you're wrong or when you made a mistake or acknowledge that you didn't show up very powerfully. And yeah, I actually did a podcast episode with someone, Ken Crenshaw from the D-backs, and he said, you got to get off being right. And it's like, that's powerful. To me, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't really care who gets the credit. I'm also not super hung up on being right.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, Braven. And Matt can probably attest to this. I've always been the opposite, where I've shied away. I don't want the spotlight. I don't want recognition. I don't want the attention. And that can be unhelpful too. Like, miss out on serving and helping people when you're not willing to put yourself out there. And that's been a big lesson I've learned. And so,
yeah, sometimes, right, it's like, it actually, the selfless thing to do would be to, quote unquote, be like, become famous. Like,
right.
To serve the purpose, right? But does it serve the purpose? So like, I think 6 months ago, I was pouring a ton into my personal brand, like just ton. Like I was posting 2 to 3 times a day. It was like consuming a lot of my like attention and energy. I was like, I think this will help the whole thing grow. I had like different mentors and people say like, you got to have a personal brand, whatever. And then I it was just a moment like talking with God where I felt like he told me like, this isn't serving your current purpose. And so I just like turned it off, like literally overnight. Like everyone who's involved, team members, hired people, everything. I didn't fire those people. Like they're the ones that set this whole thing up. We found like they're now focused on like the brand, the core brand and ads and all that. But a lot of that was built out to support my personal brand, and I just shut it off overnight because I was like, that doesn't serve the core purpose. But I do think there might be a time where God tells me like, hey, actually right now to serve the core purpose, you do need to build your personal brand. And so at that point, it would be selfish for me to hide, right? And to say like, oh, I don't want to be known. So I think, it can go both ways. It's just, hey, what's the intention? What's the thing at the end of the day? It's one of my favorite things to say or quotes is, nothing is inherently good or bad. It's only the intention. Like it's only the intent that makes them good or bad, right? Like, is killing bad? It's like, well, if it's to protect my child, like tell me it's bad or not. I don't care. I'll kill 1,000 people to protect my child, right? So it's the intention.
I think there's actually a beautiful lesson in that too, which is that we spend a lot of time thinking about like, is this decision or is this action or inaction right or wrong? And I think it's really just a lot more about like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Or, what do you feel like God wants with you or for you or from you? So I think that's a powerful lesson to like spend less time wondering like, is this right or wrong? Make a choice, stick with it, and it will be right.
Yeah. And I think that's why one of the reasons I've like chose to be like, if I feel like it's what God wants me to do, I'm just going to do it. It makes zero logical sense. I mean, we've done some deals of real estate stuff together. And like, right, like my decisions on like some of the things probably don't make sense to the logical other real estate investor. But like when I felt God has told me something, I'm like, look, the outcome to everyone else could look tragic when this is over. But if I know or I believe God told me to do it, then I know I'm in the right spot, right? It's like, like I think about one of my favorite characters in all the scriptures is Abraham, and Abraham leaves all of his riches, or like not his riches, but his current life that was like, okay, was probably seemingly great actually. But God's like, go out in the wilderness. Then God like has him like go to Egypt or whatever, where like his wife gets like taken by the king and all this like weird, crazy stuff happens to him. And then he ends up like, the king just gives him like all the wealth that he could possibly imagine. And like they leave and he gets like set up with this perfect thing. Same thing with, oh my gosh. Anyway, the son who gets sold into Joseph. Yeah. Okay, I was wanting to say Joshua. Joseph, right? Same thing. Like goes through all this bad stuff, and on the surface, everyone would have been like, "God's not taking care of you. God hates you. Like what the heck?" And it's like, oh, it was all set up right for him to be in the right spot at the right time to have that. So I'm just like, well, if I believe God's the one who wants me here, it wouldn't even matter. Like when we were moving the company here, I had some people ask like, well, what if it doesn't work out? I'm like, well, then it'll work out. Like if the company falls apart because we moved down here, then it's like, well, God was setting me up for something else.
Right.
And so it's like, it wouldn't even matter if it all on the surface failed. And so I really believe that, like, to my core.
And how has that made you feel?
Oh,
living that way.
Well, it is super scary. Like, and it's also, my wife at this point, I think, is kind of like surrendered to it, but it can be difficult to tell her, like, hey, I just had this prompting that we should sell all of our investments, sell our home that we just bought, lose money on it because I just feel like God told us to sell it, and then move into this rental. And like, she's like, when? I'm like, tomorrow. Like, you know, like that can be a scary conversation, but so there is some fear around it, but I believe, to me, this has been one of the most fulfilling years of my life, coming off of one of the most difficult, not difficult because of what was happening in my life last year. It was the most prosperous, abundant year that I'd had yet in my whole life, but I felt really like anxious, stressed. I don't like know that depression I don't want to use that word too lightly, but I felt some level of that, like of depressed, like just, like my life is not what I want it to be, to way more fulfilled, way more happy, way more just like connected. And even when things are going wrong, a sense of like, I'm still in the right place, so it's all good. And so I think it's, to me, become the end goal of my whole life, is just to feel like I'm in alignment in that way. Cause that to me is where the fulfillment comes from. And it also leaves me detached from like the outcomes. Like, oh, like what if everything fell apart? It's like, yeah, it would suck, but also, and that's what God would want. And I'm not going to just like sit back and do nothing and watch it fall apart, but I'm not attached to everything having to work out the way I pictured it having to work out. So,
yeah, listeners, this is so powerful. Like, this is really something, the underlying core belief that you hold is one for all of us to hold, which is that like everything is just right the way it is.
The present is always perfect.
Yeah.
The first law of attraction.
Yeah. And all of the fear and worry comes from the wondering about like, well, what if it doesn't work? And it's like, well, if you believe that everything will be just right, then there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us and just share a little bit about your story and your journey. Excited for Gains. I honestly feel like most of us have been just calling it Gains. In fact, when we started the episode and I said Gains, it was like in bulk, I guess, is part of the name, but now it's not. So it's exciting. Congrats on the
we've kind of been intentionally pushing the narrative of like the name just Gains, like maybe without any people knowing, to try and ease into that change. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I remember also your post a few months ago, like you were talking about when you realized like shut it all down. You were like Grants and Gains. I remember reading that. I just feel like that's super cool.
Yeah, God, Grants, and Gains. That's my three.
Yeah.
Well, one last question before we wrap up. If we've got a listener that's maybe new to leadership, new to whether entrepreneurship or something, what would be the advice you'd give someone that's looking to develop as a leader right now?
I'll give a practical advice first. Practical meaning like doing answer, which would be like, just actually let some other people do some stuff inside of whatever you're trying to accomplish. Like literally my wife, like I've been wanting to hire a nanny for a while because I want her to be more freed up to be more like mom that's like pouring into our kids than mom that's like having to like be bogged down by like dishes and all these things that aren't really pouring into the kids. It's just like has to be kept up. So anyway, I have that conversation and she's just like, well, no, I feel like a bad mom if I have help or whatever. Right. But it's like, so that's like practical is like, just let someone else start doing something for you. And it might not be done exactly the right way. It might be, they might make mistakes, and therein comes your first chance to actually be a leader. Because when they mess up, when they don't do it right, when it doesn't happen exactly how you expected it to happen, then you actually have to show up and be a leader. Like
you respond.
How do you respond? Like, do you get angry and upset? And usually probably at the start you do, like, or at least I did. I was just like a poor leader, but then you just learn. And like, it's funny, like, my team will like, on my way walking into the podcast, this is the first podcast we've done in here. And I've told them I've been gone all week. I'm like, hey, we need to get that set up. And Tyler says to me, hey dude, like we're scrambling. Like we forgot about the podcast. Like, so we're like scrambling to get everything set up and like, we don't even have all the stuff. And I think he was like trying to get a big like reaction out of me. But I just like literally was like, okay, well, I didn't probably give him good enough instruction, so we'll figure it out. It's fine. Like I had no, and then he like laughed and said he was joking. I'm like, sorry, I didn't give you the response that he probably quite wanted. My point is like, you just kind of learn to evolve to be like, look, like people are people, like we're all going to make mistakes. And so, but you get there by giving yourself opportunities to lead, and you're only going to get those by letting someone else do something for you. So anyway, that was my first, when it comes back to trusting other people, my first thing was like I had to offload some customer service. I was answering every call and chat. And as we started to grow, like that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
But the first person I gave that job to, by the way, was my wife. And just like, I wouldn't say we almost got divorced over it, but it was causing issues because she was amazing, but she would answer it slightly different than how I wanted it answered. I'm getting so upset over it, right? And it's, anyway, so you have to give yourself those opportunities, and then that's how you evolve. And you start to realize like, man, those people all quit because I was a crappy leader and they hated me, right? Okay, what do I need to evolve and change and do differently? So give yourself opportunity to lead, and you got to like start letting other people do stuff inside your organization, even if it fails, right? Like that's why I believe I'll go wherever God wants me to go, because it's just right. Like, yeah, it was supposed to, like you weren't a good leader, right? The present's always perfect. It's how, anyway. So that's what I would say practically. And then advice more generally would be something I feel like I've just really started to like internalize and adopt and like feel from God is like, I've spent an absurd amount of time stressing and beating myself up, or just feeling so anxious over like if I would make it. Like that question, like, is this ever going to work? Am I ever going to make it? Am I ever going to be successful? And I'll tell you, like right now, I'm not like at the place that I ultimately want to get in my life, but I'm at a spot that I would have thought, oh my gosh, if I could get to there, it would be like set, right? And that's happened 4 or 5 times where I've thought if I could get to that spot, oh, it would be set. And then I'm like, okay, well, that spot and that spot and that spot. And I think like if I could go back and tell me as like a 19-year-old kid something, it would be like, hey, instead of stressing and crying and worrying and struggling over like this if question, just do the things you feel called to do, and just like let the outcome come. Like that would be, I wish I could just like let myself ease off a little bit on how much pain and anxiety I put on myself. No one else put it there. I put it on myself over just the question of like, will it ever work? Will I ever get there? And just trusted that like God had a plan for me. And if I just showed up to it every day, we were gonna get where we're supposed to go. And I think that will also allow you to show up as a better leader, because you're not putting that weight onto everyone else of like, no, it had to work to that, So that would be in the beginning stages when you're frustrated and you're looking at someone ahead of you and going like, oh, am I ever going to get there? Oh, like they're so much farther than me. Oh, it's like, hey, like just don't worry about that. It's a waste of energy and resource, and just put the energy into like pouring into what you do have. Like, is there 2 people working for you? Is there 1 person that showed up to your event? Is there 10 people? Whatever it is, pour into those people, put all the energy into that. And then like the outcome is assured. I believe like the outcome is assured, and the stress of it is just a waste of resource.
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety that comes from looking into the future, where there's a lot of peace that can just be like focusing on right now.
Yeah, and it's not just like like be happy now thing. That's a part of it, but I actually think you perform better from that spot. And I used to push against that idea of like, hey, just be present and accept now and be happy with now. And like, because I was like, well, no, because I need to be unsatisfied so that I push forward.
Right.
But I've actually like found the opposite to be true. It's like, oh, when I really do try and find fulfillment here and peace here, I just actually perform better. I'm more trusting of other people. I'm a better leader. I'm more calm. I show more powerfully. And so it's not just a tactic to like be happy, which I think being happy is really important too. But I think my younger self would have heard what I just said and been like, oh, like easy for you to say. I want to be successful though. So I'm going to like keep putting this anxiety on myself, but it's like, you'll actually perform better.
Be present, maybe.
Yeah. Be present.
Yeah. It's awesome, man.
Good stuff.
Okay. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in. Today's the day. Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.